As a California person, but as a hockey person, I'll say it for Arizona, I do think you get to cut ahead of the line of expansion, right? If the NHL is going to look at potential cities, and I know Atlanta wants in, and maybe Houston, maybe some other places, like in some way, shape, or form, I think the NHL kind of owes this to hockey fans who stuck with it down there for so long. But speaking of jumping in that expansion conversation, how does it look ideally in a situation down there? And obviously you need an ownership group, so we can start with that, but where would an arena go? What would a timeline be like? What would a process be like from everything in an ideal setting and standard? How would you envision that perfectly going?
No, I mean, if we're talking ideals, I don't think the location that Alex Meruelo was looking at was ideal. It was too far away from the core of the city. Now, from a real estate perspective, and that's part of the problem we've had with ownership groups here, is they've cared more about real estate development or valuations of franchises than they've cared about the hockey team. That would have been amazing for him from a real estate standpoint, because unlike Tempe, where they were advertising they were going to create the Rodeo Drive of Arizona, in Northeast Phoenix and Scottsdale, you can say that and it actually plays to that audience. But I don't think that's the ideal location for fans. You need something that's more centrally located. Honestly, I thought the Tempe location was fantastic. Mm-hmm. It's 5 minutes from the airport. It's 10 minutes from downtown. It's right in the urban core of the city. It's 10 minutes from Old Town Scottsdale. Mm-hmm. It's on the east side of town where the vast majority of the population base resides, the vast majority of the wealth base and the corporate base resides. It has to be, first of all, on the east side of town, and it has to be somewhere along that 101 corridor. The Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community is another great location that has been bandied about a lot, but it has to be somewhere within that core. I'm even okay if it ends up back downtown, but you can't go far west, and I don't think you should be really moving too far away from the core of the city.
And speaking of Meruelo, so he's not actually done with hockey in Arizona. We should be clear. He also owns the Roadrunners, who had announced that they were thinking about playing some games at Mullet Arena. Then they said, yeah, we are going to play 6 out of our, is it 39, 38 home games?
36.
36, okay. So they were going to play some games up north. Then they pulled that back yesterday. This is all before we found out that Meruelo is officially out. What's going to happen with the Roadrunners? Because as you mentioned last night on PHNX, it doesn't seem like their future in Tucson is very secure.
I don't think so. They originally had 2 more years left on their lease deal with Tucson Arena, with the city of Tucson. I know they added a 3rd year in that recent agreement that they signed, but Alex Meruelo is building an arena up in Reno, and I believe it's scheduled to open in the fall of 2026. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take much imagination to figure out what's going to happen to the Roadrunners. I think he's going to move them up there. Yeah. So whether they play the full 3 seasons or just 2 more in Tucson, and he breaks a lease, which he's been known to do, I think the Roadrunners are going to be gone from Arizona in short order.
I'm going to try and fit in 2 or 3 more things here in just a couple minutes. I know you got to go to your other new job now, by the way. Congratulations on covering the Arizona Cardinals. For politicians now who were working with the Meruelos, and he was negotiating with them, and if there is a fresh slate and a clean start with some new ownership group, do you think maybe politicians are more motivated to get something done because it'll make them look good for the future of hockey in Arizona?
It's a difficult balance. As I mentioned before, the climate is such that it's hard to give any sort of tax incentives or any kind of breaks at all to sports owners. At the same time, I think they understand that it's important to have the team here. There was a groundswell of support for keeping the Coyotes. There are politicians I know, I've spoken to them, who would have loved to keep the Coyotes here and will probably work with that in mind. What I would say is, if it's going to get done, you better build a local coalition of civic leaders. You can't come in. I'm not saying you can't come in as an outsider and make it happen, but if you are an outsider, you better get in touch with those people who can make things happen in this community. In the past, we would have talked about people like Senator John McCain or Jerry Colangelo, who owned the Diamondbacks and the Suns. You need to find those people. And in my opinion, it wouldn't hurt if you had Shane Doan as the face of your ownership, because he is literally royalty in the city. He's the biggest hockey name in the Valley, and he would really help your cause. The other thing that Shane Doan does is he builds those bridges. He builds those relationships. He's beloved by everybody in this community, including the politicians who know him. So I think that's the approach that any new ownership group has to take in this market.
In the meantime, do former Coyotes fans, current Coyotes fans, do they care about the Utah Hockey Club? Do they still watch? How do you feel? I mean, that's professionally for you. You covered this group for so long. Now they're somewhere else. What's the investment level like about where the team went?
It's a mixed bag. There are fans who just say that they're not going to watch a single thing. They're not going to read or watch anything about Utah because they're so angry and bitter.
Of
There are
course.
others who say, "Look, we invested a lot in these guys. We're going to stick with them and we're going to follow them in Utah." So it's all over the map. I'm probably going to keep in touch with them myself because I've done this for 24 years. I've covered this franchise. I know a lot of the people, most of the people associated with that franchise. So yeah, those relationships don't go away, and I'll probably still write a little bit about Utah hockey.